Hey guys, it's me, Real Bandit. Stay tuned till after the video for not a sponsored segment, but a message from me to you. For as beautiful of a game as Twilight Princess was, and yes, that's a hill I'm 100% willing to die on, it was lacking some pretty obvious Zelda-isms. For instance, in Ocarina of Time, we were introduced to the legendary Great Deku Tree, who's supposed to be one of Hyrule's watchful protector spirits. The tree even makes a reappearance in The Wind Waker, as do its fellow Kokiri children, reincarnated as the airborne Koroks. But in Twilight Princess, both the Great Deku Tree itself and the Kokiri/Koroks are nowhere to be found. Then there's the mysterious disappearance of the Gerudo tribe, who were a pretty darn big deal in Ocarina of Time. There's even the entire Gerudo Desert area in Twilight Princess, implying pretty heavily that they were here at one point in time, so what gives? Are there any explanations for these missing pieces of the land of Hyrule? Well, friend, let me tell ya, the Zelda universe is a mysterious one, alright, filled with many questions and unfortunately not quite as many answers. But in the midst of all the mystery and apparent loose ends, there is lore. Bounteous lore. Enough lore to enable us to speculate and theorize about what happened in between the Zelda games that could explain the differences between their respective lands of Hyrule. And if you're interested in the lore behind why the Gerudo aren't in Twilight Princess, check out my theory on it, link in the description below. But that's not what we're going to focus on in this video. Instead, we're going to talk about that first bit I mentioned, the disappearance of the Great Deku Tree and all its inhabitants. But let's start with what we know. Link starts off in the game as a humble villager from the village of Ordon. He lives in a treehouse that's located right outside a dense forest, almost exactly like the Link from Ocarina of Time actually, except for one very telling detail. The inhabitants of this village aren't Kokiri children, they're grown-ups. Well, most of them anyway. But the one thing that's always bugged me when I played the game for the first time was the appearance of these Ordonians. This might sound like a huge nitpick, but hear me out. Have you ever noticed their ears? Specifically how round they are? Listen, any Zelda fan worth their salt knows that Hylians have pointed ears. This is something that's been true since the beginning, and most notably since the jump to 3D. In Ocarina of Time, the only people who didn't have pointed ears were the Gerudo. The women in Gerudo Valley and even King Ganondorf himself all sport nice, normal-looking rounded ears, while everyone else in the game has pointed ones. Listen, I know you may be rolling your eyes right now, but trust me, it's a big deal. I even made a video about Ganondorf's ears. I'm pointing all this out, no pun intended, because according to the aforementioned games and even some lore we can read in Masterworks Creating a Champion, ear shape is indicative of the Hylian race, meaning quite literally that in Twilight Princess, Link is Hylian, but the Ordonians specifically are not. Now, of course, the people of Ordon aren't the only characters in the game with not pointy ears, but that doesn't really matter for this theory. The only fact I want to drive home here is that Ordonians are not Hylians. They're another race entirely. So this begs the question, what are they? Well, I'll just go ahead and spoil the ending of the theory by saying I'm gonna try to prove to you that they are, in fact, the Kokiri from Ocarina of Time. So let me explain. Rewind back to the events of Ocarina of Time. At the end of the game, the new Deku Tree is sprouting and growing, and Link has defeated Ganondorf and sealed him away, and all is well and good. But that was the adult timeline, which leads directly into the events of the Wind Waker, and specifically into the new Great Deku Tree and the evolutionary Koroks. When Link is sent back in time, though, at the end of the game, the child timeline is created, and in that timeline, the Great Deku Tree dies and no sprout is formed. See, in the adult timeline, Link ages forward by 7 years and then returns to the Lost Woods in order to break the curse on the Forest Temple. Only by doing this is the Deku Tree sprout able to, sprout. This is according to the little guy's own words and is evidenced by the fact that the sprout didn't sprout for 7 long years until Link defeated the Forest Temple. But 7 years ago, Link never did this, meaning the new Deku Tree never came into existence. This explains per lore the absence of a Great Deku Tree in Twilight Princess. But what does this mean for the Kokiri of Ocarina of Time? According to the Kokiri themselves, the Great Deku Tree taught them that if any of them were to ever leave the woods, they would die. This, however, is a lie. Well, kind of. See, at the end of the game, there are clearly several, if not all, of the Kokiri children outside of the woods. They're shown to be partaking in the wild party being thrown in the wake of Ganondorf's demise. This takes place in the corral of Lon Lon Ranch, pretty darn far away from the Kokiri forest, so clearly when the Kokiri leave the woods, in the words of Satan, "Ye shall not surely die." die. But does this mean that the Deku Tree was lying to them? I mean, what was the point? Just to spread some fear-mongering amongst the little forest children? This is purely theoretical, but I personally believe that what the Deku Tree meant by this is that if the Kokiri were to ever leave the Kokiri forest, no, they won't drop dead, but they will be leaving the protection and influence of the Deku Tree, seeing as he is the protector of the forest, meaning that what he meant by if you leave the forest is really if you leave me. See, the reason why I quoted from the Bible a few moments ago was because I feel like something similar is happening here. As I'm sure some of you know, in the early chapters of the book of Genesis, the story goes that the immortal Adam and Eve partook of a forbidden fruit which God told them they'd die if they ever ate. However, after they ate it, they didn't die. Rather, they turned mortal. Death was added to their life, if you will. I can't help but feel that this is what the Deku Tree meant by saying the Kokiri would die if they left him when clearly they don't. Perhaps what he meant is that if they left his protection, death would be added to their life. They would become mortal. And in the child timeline events following Ocarina of Time, the Great Deku Tree is dead and gone, meaning his protection is dead and gone. And the Kokiri themselves would therefore quote-unquote die and become mortal and be devoid of a guardian spirit. Now let's return to Twilight Princess. In this game, the only thing we have connecting the Kokiri to the world directly would be their blatantly obvious symbol present in the Forest Temple. I mean, it is obviously the Kokiri symbol and it's all over the place, which implies that the entire temple itself was built and once inhabited by the Kokiri. And you know what the temple actually is? A giant hollowed out tree. Now, let me think, when have we ever seen a giant tree associated with the Kokiri before? Oh yeah, that's right. In Wind Waker, in Ocarina of Time, and recently Breath of the Wild, where the Kokiri/Koroks are associated with the Great Deku Tree. And it just so happens that in this timeline, the Great Deku Tree is dead, hollowed out. Remember what happens in Ocarina of Time when the Deku Tree dies? Monsters begin to invade the forest. So what if the Kokiri were forced to move further into the woods to escape the growing number of monsters? What if they took shelter within the husk of their dead protector, the Deku Tree, and transformed the inside of the tree into what we now recognize as the Forest Temple in Twilight Princess? But as we can see, once the corruption of the Twilight started to invade Hyrule prior to the events of Twilight Princess, the Forest Temple itself started to become a dangerous place, and was subsequently abandoned by the Kokiri, who then moved once again to establish a new village, the village of Ordon, where they lived on until the events of Twilight Princess. And if the Kokiri really are the Ordonians, this explains why there are Kokiri symbols in the Forest Temple and why the villagers of Ordon, who are not Hylians, live right outside Faron Woods, which, get this, was called the Kokiri Forest in Ocarina of Time according to the encyclopedia. And why one of the Ordonian people is literally named Fado, or Fado, however you say that, which is notably the same name as a famous Kokiri individual who has popped up multiple times in the series. Now, there's a lot of proof in favor of this theory, but there are a couple counterpoints which I'll discuss briefly. The first being that the Forest Temple in Twilight Princess doesn't look much like the Deku Tree from Ocarina of Time, and its location doesn't exactly match up. I see your point, and I raise you a neither does Death Mountain, or Lake Hylia, or Gerudo Desert, or Zora's Domain, or Hyrule Castle. Listen, I personally don't put too much stock into trying to figure out why the layout or appearance of the land of Hyrule seems to change so much from game to game, especially when you've got Twilight Princess taking place apparently only like 100 to 200 years after Ocarina of Time, according to Aonuma himself. And I'm not a geologist, but I'm pretty sure that doesn't give that much time for natural changes to landscape, especially not changes of this scale. There's just no way besides extremely large leaps of speculation to explain why Zora's Domain is now located to the far north of Hyrule Castle, or why the Temple of Time is now located within a forest, or why the Gerudo Desert is now on the other side of Lake Hylia when before it was neighboring it and connected by a river. It's just as important as figuring something out is to admit when you can't figure something out. I mean, after all, we're just supposed to accept that this volcano is the same as this volcano, and that this lake is the same as this lake. So I personally don't mind believing that this large tree in Faron Wood/Kokiri Forest surrounded by Kokiri symbolism is now this large tree in Faron Wood/Kokiri Forest surrounded by Kokiri symbolism, especially when it would answer pretty much everything regarding the mysterious disappearances of the forest dwellers. The second counterpoint is that the Kokiri evolved into the monkeys present around the Forest Temple and not the Ordonians themselves. Now clearly I agree that the Kokiri evolved, since that's the one thing they're shown to always do in other games. but I think their evolution was into regular mortal people, complete with regular mortal rounded ears. I won't deny though that it's possible that the Kokiri did evolve into the monkeys. I mean, hell, maybe even Mido evolved into Ook the baboon. But I just find it hard to believe that they'd evolve into a form that can't speak, as that's never been the case in any of the other games that they're present in. I also feel that the Kokiri's special forms are given to them by way of the power of the Deku tree, and that without the Deku tree, they'd turn into a regular non-magical form, which would in this case be the non-magical ordinary Ordonian humans. Although this could also be said about turning into ordinary non-magical monkeys. That much I can't refute fully, so I'll admit it is possible that they evolved into the monkeys. But this is all just my theory. What do you guys think? Did the Kokiri evolve into the Ordonians of Twilight Princess? Did they turn into the monkeys? Or are they all actually dead and gone and this is just a random forest and that is just a random tree? And that's just a random symbol? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching. Please consider leaving a like if you enjoyed the theory or at least my efforts into it, and subscribe if you haven't already for many more super cool lore videos to come. Hey guys, it's me again, you know, Real Bandit. I just wanted to pop in real quick and talk about something rather tragic that happened to me recently. I was hacked. Personally. As in, my personal Facebook account was hacked into and insta-banned, because that's how Meta customer service works. They claim that it's so bad because of COVID era, but apparently it's always been terrible, so I don't really know. Just pro tip, make sure you don't have anything on your social media networks that isn't backed up somewhere safe that you have access to, or else, you never know, you might get insta-banned and then immediately lose access to all sorts of stuff. I personally lost pictures and videos of when my parents were back together, of some of my grandparents that have moved on, of my own graduation, my little brother's graduation, the list goes on. But I'm bringing it up here not just to warn you guys about the dangers of keeping things online without backing them up, but also because my YouTuber Instagram account, you know, my Instagram account under Bandit Games was attached to my personal Facebook account. And it got deleted too. So I'm essentially just trying to pop up here and inform those of you who were following me, or if you'd like to follow me for all the fun, stupid stuff that I post there, that I have a new Instagram that's now under the name JordanHerndon96, which is just my real name. But don't worry, I have it under a much more safe Gmail account this time. I made a post about it actually a few days ago here on the channel, and a lot of people thought that the post itself was suspicious, which is just so ironic and funny the more that you think about it. But good on you people for being cautious, and I'm looking at you, Kinroar and my online ID. I assure you, it is I, the real bandit. Unless I'm a robot under the skin. I probably sounded off because I was, I don't know, frustrated, flustered, feeling hopeless. If you've ever had something stolen from you that is priceless, you probably understand the feeling. Anyway, that's the end of my ramble, but here's the recap for you. Number 1, follow me on Instagram at JordanHerndon96, and number 2, don't upload anything on the internet that's important to you without backing it up first. That's all. This is Bandit hoping forward to blah. This is Bandit looking forward to seeing you next time and signing out. Peace!